And we are back on Capitol Tonight. As we mentioned earlier this week, the Scaffold law was the subject of dueling rallies at the Capitol this week. My guest tonight wants to see the Scaffold law reformed, citing that it is specifically harmful to minority and women-owned construction businesses. A radio ad featuring Reverend Jacques DeGraff has launched to coincide with caucus weekend. We have a bit of it for you to hear.
This is Black and Latino Caucus Weekend in Albany. We're coming because it's time for a change. We can't have business as usual, and they can't have their usual party. Our businesses are in a crisis. The Scaffold law is killing jobs we so badly need and killing businesses that...
Okay, so joining me now to talk more about this is the Reverend Jacques DeGraff himself of 100 Black Men Incorporated. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so that radio ad makes no bones about, about what you are seeking. I think that the caucus, well, let's start this way. How has the caucus responded?
Well, I think we have their attention. We've had their attention, but I think it's on another level. A lot of this is inside baseball.
Yeah.
It's public policy in the Capitol. But now we've taken it to the communities directly, and for some people that's uncomfortable.
Right. So it's interesting, though, that this, and I said this to Assemblyman Moya, who's representing the other side, who was on the show earlier this week, this debate has been going on for years over the Scaffold law, but now it has this new focus, which is a focus on minority rights for Black and Latino workers, for Black and Latino owned businesses. You and I have spoken about this previously, but now it's actually sharpened the debate. How did that come to be?
Well, actually what's happening is an economic crisis for minority and women-owned businesses. Why? Because the big insurance companies are pulling out of the New York market. They can't get insurance. In many of the opportunity programs that were created in the public sector, wraparound insurance came with the package. When you drop the insurance and pass to the premiums on to the owners, they are now onerous because of the pullback from these companies. So others would have you believe that if we are not smart enough to speak for ourselves and that we're fronts for somebody else. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is our communities, the minority-owned and women-owned businesses, are impacted adversely in a greater proportion than majority firms. Let's
also just remind people what we're talking about here. We're talking about presumed liability if in fact there is an accident on a construction site that deals with a scaffold, in which a scaffold is involved.
Gravity-related injuries. And the standard now is absolute liability, which means you hear one side of the story, totally un-American. The standard that we're seeking is not for anything that's preordained, but it's just that people can hear both sides of the story, comparative liability. That's the essence of the argument. No matter what they say about all these other things, they're obfuscations. What does that mean? It means that who isn't for safety?
Right.
And so what we're saying is that when there are inept or incompetent contractors, when there are abusive owners, prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. No one is saying anything other than that. When we're saying about safety guidelines, we support OSHA guidelines. We care about our workers, and so we say this change would not reduce protections by one whit. So those are just smoke screens, and that's why we're saying to the caucus, remember who you are.
What does that mean? Remember
who you are and where you came from when you started out. Remember that you said that you wanted to serve your communities. And we're saying that the people who create the jobs in our communities, the people who hire those people, the people who put everything and risk it on their dream to go into business are now calling on these legislators to make a difference and stand up for us.
So I took this radio ad and I put it up on our blog, State of Politics, earlier today. And very quickly I got a text from Senator Dianne Savino, right? So she's on the Labor Committee and she's also a member of the IDC, which is a key element in the Senate. And she said the problem is, as you just alluded, the problem is unscrupulous contractors who don't care about their workers, and we don't need to make this change. We need to crack down on those bad actors. And what is your response to that?
There is no one in this debate who has indicated how such an action would bring the insurance companies back into New York. It's simply a specious argument, perhaps well-intentioned, and I will not question anyone's motives, but what I'm saying is the people who are affected, the minority and women-owned businesses, are in a crisis right now. Why? Because their premiums are being raised astronomically, the ones who are getting coverage, and the others are losing their insurance. They're going to go out of business before the end of the year unless this is changed.
Yeah, you've talked about, I mean, sort of this smoke screen, who's really behind it, who's representing, whose interests. I mean, are you talking about the trial lawyers? Is that
Well,
what you're talking about?
the trial lawyers are front and center in this, but the fact of the matter is, when people ask about people being dupes, then they need to say, are you saying the Latino Builders Council is a front organization? Mm-hmm. Amity today, the Association of Minority Entrepreneurs in New York, held its 38th Legislative Caucus Weekend Conference today. Are they a front? No, I think that that's clearly people who are either ill-advised, uninformed, or ill-intentioned on this, and so we're not going to be diverted by that. We are intending to continue to keep the pressure on the caucus, on the speaker, and on the governor, to say we need change, we need reform, and we need it now.
Yeah, well, the governor seems to be open.
He certainly does.
Okay, fine. So my understanding is not only did he say that, but there have been high-level meetings with members of his cabinet, and things are moving in a direction that perhaps this could get done, probably not as part of the budget, but maybe afterwards. Is there some middle ground that you see where you guys give up something and the other side gives up something so you can come to some pragmatic, happy medium?
You know, it's a story of the bacon and the eggs and what it means to the chicken and the pig. We're saying, what would we give up? Our existence? We're saying that this is an issue of survival. And just as the trial lawyers had to be regulated through the medical malpractice, that it's time to come for a change. 49 other states do it in the other way, and we're asking New York to come to the 21st century.
Where are the unions? It seems that if you could convince the labor unions that this is an issue, to be on your side, because not enough development means not enough jobs, means folks who are members of labor are getting hurt, as well as people who are Black, Latino, some one and the same in many cases. I mean, can't you get them to join you? And if you could, wouldn't you win the argument?
Well, I'd rather not deal with that speculation. I can tell you this. For as many people that are in construction are in unions, there are as many people who are not in unions, who work under the same conditions. And we have reached out to labor, and they have the reasons that they will perhaps explain to you. But we're appealing to the people who we elected, who come from our communities, who promised us that they would serve us. Those are the people we're calling on, and those are the people that we're going to be holding accountable. Because at some point, we're going to be rating who was with us and who was not.
Right, okay, well that was going to be my next question. It's an election year. And obviously, as I said, this has been an issue that has been on the burner, front, back, wherever it has been, changes from year to year for quite some time. What are you going to do in terms of turning up the heat? You've got this ad. People are not thrilled with it. I mean, caucus weekend is a time that's, yes, it's about policy, but it's also about people having a good time, and they don't like to get poked when they're here to have fun.
These people don't like to get poked, but the people who are suffering like the ad.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they do.
Some people are speaking up for me. People who are not informed in the community saying that I thought my legislator was taking care of business. So I don't accept the notion that people are upset. The people who are upset are become uncomfortable.
So
and
what do you do?
Because they're uncomfortable, we now have their attention.
All right, fair enough. So you have their attention. What do you do if it doesn't move?
It's going to move.
All right, but let's assume that, let's say, devil's advocate, it doesn't. It's an election year. Will you spend money to take these people out in some sort of symbolic way? You can't take the entire caucus out, obviously.
No, but there's at least 5 of them who could go if they were pushed over like that, number one. But before this is over, we will give a rating of the caucus, and you'll either get an A+ or an F.
That's it? There's nothing, there's no middle ground?
When we are struggling for our existence, and so when people are struggling for their existence, they have to do what they have to do. It is not another issue. It is not, we'll roll it over to a special session. We won't take it after the election. Either they will address this issue or they will face the consequences like everyone else. We're facing the consequences of 20 years of their inaction, and we're not going to suffer alone.
Well, it is some very tough talk from you, Reverend, and we will be following this issue. I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We need to take one last short break, but still ahead, developers and some county officials are pushing for a hotel to